So, you know, one of these days I'll finish writing my book, which I'm calling Connecting Hearts. That is, there are people with the resources, um, and then there are people with big hearts, but they don't have the resources. Connecting the two in some way helps children who don't have parents, that's orphans. Um, I want to say, friends, um, the few years God has given me access to caring for orphans, there's one area which I think, with the limited resources, the impact can be big. At the same time, help a lot of children, rescue them in situations which otherwise would have been messed up. I want to say that there was a time I used to serve in an organization where we would feed children, um, 15 US dollars. We're able to give a child a meal every day for 3 months. The cost would have been much more if the children were in an orphanage, but these ones were staying in the community with their own relatives or someone, some caregiver. I have seen, I'm only proposing one. Brothers and sisters, please note that's not the ultimate. I'm not saying that's the end of the game, that's the solution, but I'm talking in my own setup in my country where I think from different sources I've noted that there are many children who are orphaned, who are in rural areas, who are being looked after by grandparents and so on. And because you don't have grandparents on their own need care, somebody caring for them, but they have to find themselves caring for or their grandchildren. It's a challenge. Now, the cause of this, if you work backwards, it would have been HIV that created that kind of a challenge that the grandparents' children would have been working, married in town, and then they died, and children were shuttled to the rural areas to be looked after by the grandparents. Well, obviously, the other challenges came, COVID and stuff and whatever. Um, so we do have, this is according to me, more than 2 million orphans in the country. And few are on the street, most are in some home somewhere, and sometime grandparents marry their grandchildren who are girls off very quickly before they reach 18 years old as minors, because their hope is some guy comes and lies to this girl that, look, I love you, let's get married and things like that, and before you know it, she's pregnant and the guy disappears, and that whole cycle is repeated again. Child, an orphan, is a child, there is no father. And in some situations, you have whoever was caring for them asking them to leave. And yeah, then problems begin to come. Now, so what am I suggesting? I can keep telling you of the things that can go wrong. The young people, boys, yeah, of course, they are either end up looking after cattle, or they disappear and go to some farm or cross the border, and these are minors, and it's like they're supposed to be in school, but they end up. So in the end, the other challenge that would then exist is they don't have documentation, they don't have birth certificates, and they, because no one around emphasizes that, look, those children need pieces of paper. So if they need to get a passport, they need to have birth certificate. If they need to get the national IDs, they need birth certificate. So the whole thing becomes messed up if there is no people around who are caring. I'm a Christian, so I would obviously push it towards the local church and say that's where a pastor and his congregation, because I remember a pastor who used to have a number of congregations in Binga. That man, the communities looked after the orphans. At church, the pastors would insist that once a month people brought things, food and whatever, that would then be distributed to the orphans in that particular community. Okay, let me go back to what I mentioned about those connecting hearts. Those with the resources and those with big hearts, but they don't have the resources. Now, imagine there is a study that was done by some organization which showed that if children, particularly girls, obviously it also may impact boys too, if they went far with education, secondary education, um, ended up with some kind of a skill, um, they were less likely to get married when they were minors. Because in some way, for them or those who are looking after them, getting married early is like I'm running away from problems, from poverty, from things like that. Obviously, poverty is a big variable in all this. But imagine, this is me, imagine those with big hearts partner with a local pastor in the rural area. They can have an intermediate, someone in town who then takes the resources to the rural area and whatever, whatever. But there is a pastor in the rural area. There is a congregation in the rural area. That congregation, obviously, a change of mindset. It's a model which I'm convinced it works. They are drilled that the boys and girls who don't have parents, who are being looked by some grand whatever, it is their responsibilities as the church to look after those children. Start. So it's their responsibility. So somehow the church leadership, whoever, they're indoctrinated that it is your responsibility to look after these boys and girls. I can tell you of horrible stories which I did come across maybe 10 or so years ago, where children who were a child headed home in the rural areas, children died of starvation. And the community around only got to find out maybe weeks later that those children had died of starvation. Imagine local church says, we know that place, that place, that place, a grandmom, a grand sekuru, whoever is looking after children who are orphaned. Imagine this church is committed. they can start small and say, once a month, we are going to bring whatever we have and share with the families that are looking after the children. But now remember, education. They may not necessarily have the resources to pay school fees. We were driving to some rural area with some visitors and came across children. It was the first day of school. They were supposed to be in school, but we saw them coming opposite direction from the school. I stopped. Actually, I was driving. I stopped the van I was driving, and I went to them. I asked them. I said, "Why are you going the opposite direction? Why are you not in school?" They said, "No, we don't have school fees, so we have been told to go home." And I asked, I said, how much at the time? It was just $15. And I imagined the many times in town where pizza, you blow that for lunch for pizza, but it would make a difference in the life of a child because that $15 would last them a whole 3 months in school. So imagine the local church, committed pastor and his eldership team. They know, they've done their survey, they know where the orphans are. They talk to the primary caregivers, the grandparents, whoever, and say, look, your children are now our children. We would like your child to go to school. We will pay. We will make sure that they learn. Notice I have not said we get the children to come to church. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they just commit to make sure school fees is paid for. Better still, they just make sure that there is food in the home. If the resources are even more available, they make sure that those boys and girls have clothes. Brothers and sisters, just that, which can be about $50 per month, 50 times 12, 5 times 12, I don't know, is that 6? Uh, that's about 600, I don't know. 50 times 10 is 500 plus another 100 is 600. So that would be $600 per year. That can provide food, clothing, and school fees for a child. If that was increased, I mean, that I'm just saying 600 per year for one child. Now, depending on again on the availability, if there is enough resources, that 10 children, that's 6,000 per year, which will make a big impact in the lives of those children. If there's more resources, 20 children, that's 12,000. Now, the second thing I want to say, this is not a quick fix type of a thing. Once you commit to saying, that's why it's sometimes very good to work with small numbers, 10, 5, 3, whatever. If the resources are available, so you plan, because it means if you bring in this child to grade 1, first grade, in some way, if you are convinced, like I'm trying to convince you, that education for girls, it will get them not get married quickly. If there is a way of you supporting this child, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7. That's primary. Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4, that's secondary. Form 5, Form 6, that's, we call it A level in my country. And if the resources are available, even send them to university. So the commitment is for a long period of time. It might even mean that money is set aside for. It's a long haul. It's not a quick fix type of thing. You must be committed for that whole thing to come through. I am convinced in my heart that a setup like that, the chances of there being great success are higher. Again, because I'm a Christian, for those children, I would then maybe once a year sponsor them to go to a camp. It could be a scripture union camp, it could be whatever camp, church camp, whatever, where they go, interact with other children, not necessarily within their community, to learn some things, because I am trying to create an environment where they can choose Jesus for themselves. I don't force them because I'm funding their education. No, that's not the idea. But to create an environment where they choose Jesus for themselves. Um, yeah. So this is my dream, and you can imagine for many people with the resources and the heart, and those with the heart without the resources, if those people connected, and in different communities, we have, wow, 100,000 children going through that, committed pastors, committed eldership, committed church that says together we can rescue these boys and girls. It's not quick fix, brothers and sisters. It's praying for those boys and girls, exposing them to the right things, sometimes giving them material that helps them to, because the environment they are in would be harsh, but it requires men and women around them who will be committed. I don't want to say there's no role which the grandparents can play, but they have challenges of their own which require outsiders. And yeah, then there can be some people who are monitoring and evaluating that and seeing where are we going right, where are we going wrong, which communities are doing a good job and things like that. I believe in my heart that depending on the availability of resources, a clear long-term plan, a lot of great things can happen, and we can harvest children, because if we catch them between the age of 4 and 14, where most people believe that 80% of those who are adults who know Christ, it happened during that age. If you go online and search of the 4-14 window, yeah, I believe that great things can happen. So this is my take, which for people who have resources, who want to see big impact happening, lives of children with no parents being transformed, that's my take. And I believe that that's possible. Thank you.